out of listening, you're able to get a lot. So there's also the meme that goes when someone wants to sing that don't listen to the voice, listen to the message. So it's about what is being delivered. It's not about who is delivering it. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great. The conversation in the hot seat this morning then is essentially what's happening with this latest report from the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Economic choices are hurting citizens, is what we're being told. Deepening inequality. 4 years is the time we're looking at. Interest on public debt has jumped to 25% from 18% of total spending. Estimates suggest that wealth taxation in Kenya could generate up to 129 billion shillings, nearly double the current budget for social protection, and it goes on. You've released 2 new reports showing how Kenya's current economic direction is stripping resources from essential services. We're talking about the economics of repression, essentially, unfortunately, and looking at questions about who owns Kenya. This is one of the big ones when you come to land. That the numbers are, in terms of what the scale is doing, are interesting because 2% of Kenya's population owns 70+% of Kenya's arable land. These are some of the things that we are looking at today. And this is all according to a report that was done. First of all, let's look at what the thrust of the report was in the first place, why it was necessary to do this and look into it. We'll start with you, Gladys.
So the reason why we did the report is because we are looking at how Kenyans are struggling, especially the ordinary Kenyans, when it comes to issues of taxation. There's a very huge burden on issues of taxation to the common man. And our tax base majorly is on consumption and income. And that means that the ordinary people are the ones who largely are carrying the biggest burden when it comes to issues of tax. But there's a huge wealth that is never really taxed, and it's called the land. And this report was majorly looking at the historical background of how land in Kenya is owned. And we all know the history of how land, especially during the colonial times, was taken from Kenyans, given to the white settlers, and thereafter, post-independence, the way the elite captured the distribution of land. So in essence, we are saying that 2% of Kenyans who own huge tracts of land, and we're talking of from 200 acres and above, and are actually going scot-free when it comes to issues of paying tax to that land. Because majority of that land is very idle. Majority of that land is just kept for speculation. And the people, 98% of the population, actually from the report says that they only have like 3 acres of land, 98% of the population. So that means the 2% of the population that own this land, they usually don't do much with the land. So it's idle. And it means when you're also looking at how land is taxed in Kenya, we're looking even at the land rates that are paid. We were looking at some of these counties and the rolls that they use. They're so outdated. They are using rates as back as in the 80s. So in a nutshell, there are people who are really sitting quietly with their wealth accumulating day in, day out, because some of these land are in very prime areas. And the common person is the one now is suffering when it comes to cushioning the budget of this country. When it comes to fuel tax, we all pay the fuel levy, regardless of whether I earn 1 million, regardless of whether I earn 15,000 shillings. We pay the same. So it's quite an injustice to the person who owns maybe 1/8 of an acre, paying the same level of tax with someone who owns maybe 1,000 acres of land, and they're using the same services. So in short, the report looks at how best the country can be able to increase their revenue through taxing the wealth, and this wealth is the land. Because we all know land is a source of, it's a source, when it comes to production, land is the main factor. And so if we do not tax land, it means that many people are suffering because mere 2% of the population. Clearly, it's quite disturbing, and they own almost, I would say, 70. You said 70, but it's by the report. I think it's around 52% of the land in Kenya. So that means basically they own Kenya. I would say they own half of Kenya, but they contribute little when it comes to taxation. And we all know taxation is what runs this country.
Yeah, and it speaks of a question. I was going through the report, and the question is, who owns Kenya? It appears as if it's the 2% that you're talking about, But even then, there are laws. There is a taxation regime. But one would say the taxation regime is aimed at hurting majority and benefiting the few. Why would that be the case?
So I'll take us a bit on the broad objective, because it all points to the planning and budgeting processes of a country. And in an ideal situation, the planning and budgeting should be about the public and their welfare. So the responsibility to provide the economic and social rights, human rights in general, should be by the government of the day. And so that's why we took it upon ourselves as Kenya Human Rights Commission, looking at the human rights angle to some of the decisions, especially within our budgeting and planning processes. And it's not news. We all know that as a country, we are grappling with high wage bill. We are grappling with high debt servicing. And the human rights angle to it is what we are missing, the nuances, the experiences of the people. And broadly, that's what government should be all about. And so because this is an obligation in the Constitution, and the fact that as Kenya we have ratified to many international instruments, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Convention on the Economic and Social Rights, the Convention on Civil and Political Rights, the Maputo Protocol. I mean, there are many, including the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability. So all this, together with the Constitution of the day, bestows a responsibility on the government to ensure that when it's planning and budgeting, people are at the center of it. But unfortunately, that's not the case we have today. And this is what led Kenya Human Rights Commission to invest in this process, to speak to the people, and also just get to understand what do our books, what do our budget documents illustrate in terms of how we are faring as a government.
Okay, I'm sorry, but the folks who have purchased, have they purchased this land? Did they grab the land? Did they have the buying power, the purchasing power to take the land at the moment? But they have it. Did they make was a sale made? Did they take it forcefully from people? How do they get into the possession of this land? Gladys.
So we all know the history of land in Kenya, and of course how it was taken from the indigenous communities during the colonial times. And we all know again who owns the land based on who knew who, or what power or what position one had during post-independence. So majority of the land that we have, even when you look at the TJRC report, the Ndungu land report, I mean, majority of the huge land that people have were not acquired through the right ways. So we can't say that majority of these people bought this land, but it was more of land that exchanged hands, land that was supposed to have gone to Kenyans. Unfortunately, it was captured by the elites of those days. And that's why you hear Kenyans say, my grandfather, instead of doing ABCD, grabbing land the way others were grabbing land during those times, maybe it was dancing on Saturday. We see those memes and all that. So land ownership in Kenya, of course, is usually related with injustices. So majority of the people, majority of the families that own land in Kenya, those huge tracts of land, they never took it, or rather they never got it through the right ways. They never purchased it, or say, through the right ways. Usually it's more about land grabbing, it's more about dispossessing majority of Kenyans.
How is somebody dispossessed of their land?
So
it's my land,
yeah.
Whether it's ancestral or otherwise, how is one dispossessed of that which belongs to them?
Yeah.
How do we see this happening?
So I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in our country is corruption, especially when it comes to issues of land, where you find that majority of people, especially in the coast region, you find that someone has been born and bred in the coast region, the ancestors have been buried that land, but they do not own that piece of land. Someone else has that title, and that's why in the coast region we have so many squatters. And every now and then we are grappling with the issue of people being chased away from places that they call their ancestral home or their land. So, and of course, this happen. It's something that historical from our colonial masters, and then came politicians who grabbed their land, and even right now we continue seeing a land, especially public land that is in prime areas, being grabbed. We're also seeing the Community Land Act that came into force in 2016, and it necessitated that all group ranches transition to community land. But you'll be shocked in a place like Narok County. Narok County has never transitioned any group ranch into community land. And as it is right now, you'll find that who is who in Kenya currently owns a huge chunk of land in Narok. And you want to ask yourself, how have they gotten this land? So it tells you that there's a lot that goes on when it comes to issues of land and how land exchanges hands. And many communities, especially the pastoralist community, unfortunately, are the ones who have borne the brand of this land grabbing or land dispossession.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just going to follow through this a little bit, because I think when you look at the origin of it, then the things that we speak about today, where we look at these glaring figures, then maybe helps us to look towards solutions in terms of the protection of people's rights. So with the dispossession of the land of these folks, there was no security agency, the vanguard of these rights. There was nobody who was stepping in to help. I know you look at me smiling, so I don't know what happens. But, if we can put this out in the open, when somebody is dispossessed of their land, is there no, process for complaint? Who do they speak to? Or are people in cahoots one to the other? What happens? Because we're looking at decades of the same behavior over and over again, to the point whereby the staggering numbers in this report then are in 2025. So is there no point for recourse where somebody goes and says, well, we had this 10 acres of land, it belonged to our family, but now there's one left, and the folks who have it are just here, we can see them. Yeah. Is there no recourse, legal recourse, to say, get it back to those who own it?
Of course, there is legal recourse. We have the National Land Commission, and one of the mandates of the National Land Commission is to ensure that historical land injustices or historical land claims are addressed. And I want just to give an example of Kakuzi. Kakuzi has a list of 1,000+ acres of land in Kiambu and Murang'a and partly in Machakos. And recently, we saw that there was a ruling by the NLC that they need to give a portion, or like 1,000 acres, to communities, because that land belonged to the communities. But you see, they've gone again to court to challenge that decision. And you're looking at not just Kakuzi, you're looking at the likes of Del Monte, we're looking at the likes of Tata Mining Company. In Magadi, the other day we saw the conflict that was between the county government of Kajiado and Magadi, a company that has a concession of 224,000 acres of land, and they're only utilizing around 11,000 acres of it. And when it comes to issues of paying land rates, they do not want to pay according to market value. So we are looking at it in such a way that these people, especially the foreign investors, they are protected by the law, because you find that, like the Magadi Mining Company, the lease was for 100 years, since 1901 up to, I think, was it last year but one? So the lease was for 100 years. Now the lease is over, and now the community says, now we need to sit on the table and negotiate afresh. But again, you find that they are powerful voices of powerful people who are part of these deals, and becomes a little hard for the communities to really get what is gainfully theirs. But what we are saying is that we have laws in place. The Constitution of Kenya is very clear. We have the land policy as well. the NLC, we have laws in place, but the biggest challenge is implementing and enforcing those laws. Because again, the biggest culprits are the ones who make those laws.
So we talk about taxation that is there. We talk about the laws that do exist. We talk about NLC that has the powers to deal with matters to do with land in the country. But we also find that NLC as well finds itself in a tight place because we have politics, and you find some decisions that are coming from that office and you ask yourself, really? I thought you are the custodians. You have the powers to reign over decisions around land that anything that is that belongs to the people of Kenya, it is you to speak about. But you found it is the political class that is addressing itself on the same and not NLC as Kenyans would expect. But that, even as we have this discussion, so there is the aspect that you look at the high net areas. So let's talk about the Karens, let's talk about the Kilimanis, let's talk about the Rundas, right? And you look at the taxation in those areas vis-a-vis other areas that are not so lucrative. And there is kidogo disparity. And one would say those are designed to protect the haves. The have-nots, mtajipanga kidogo. And would I be right if I just paint that picture like that?
You're very right. Our systems, the taxation systems actually favor the high net worth individuals. And when you look at, for instance, just a good example would be the Finance Bill of 2024 and even 2023. You see that the VAT, for instance, that affects the common mwananchi, that's where the government was interested. When you look at the incomes of the ordinary Kenyans, that's where the direction in terms of taxing was pointed to. When you look at the housing levy, for instance, the shift share, all that was towards the common mwananchi. But then you see things such as aircraft, those ones that are owned by high net worth individuals, they're the ones that are exempted. Look at the real estate, for instance, who are the people in there, you see? So that basically indicates that the system actually favors the high-end individuals, but again, burdens more the ordinary Kenyans. And when you look at it broadly, you look at in terms of investment of those taxes as well, because when you give taxes, you have an expectation that the government will ensure that the public sector will ensure that the welfare of the mwananchi is catered for. But then look at these two huge spending factors, the debt repayment, for instance, and also the wage bill. What are they doing? They have crowded out resources that would have otherwise gone towards spending in sectors such as health, such as education, such as food, water and sanitation, and social protection that the taxpayer cares more about. And I'll just quickly speak to some of these findings, because at the end of the day, we now are saying that our revenues have been mortgaged. And let's just look at it quickly. Like, you are managing a household that within every given month, you see yourself before paying school fees for your children, before buying medicine, that 68% of your income is given to the creditors. You have to pay. And then at the same time, you have these fixed bills. You have electricity bill, you have water bill, you have rent to pay. That also, again, takes about 42%. We are talking about 100% at this particular point. So you have not bought bread, you have not eaten, you have not taken your children to school. That's basically the picture in the country at the moment, and that's actually a problem of survival. And so, as we're having this conversation, which is a national, a matter of national interest, I think we cannot avoid to bring politics into it, because the current debt situation, the current wage bill situation is actually a political combustion. It's basically news and something that the current regime, that's the Kenya Kwanza regime, needs to pay attention, because the state of public debt, the state of wage bill is actually crowds out political legitimacy. And this explains why We have wealth, but unfortunately, this wealth has been locked in a vault labeled debt repayment. It explains why in 2023, 2024, and 2025 we've had public protests. This year alone, we can count up to 5 protests characterized in doctors' strikes, nurses' strikes, teachers' strikes, and also lecturers' strikes, the youth strikes because there's high unemployment. You see limited disbursement of capitation to schools. It explains why our children have to be sent home early enough so that the government can keep on surviving. Yet, it never even stops and rethinks of its decisions. And so as we head towards 2027, my view would be that the government of the day stops. And instead of handing over bribes that we witnessed during the by-election, how about you take this money and invest in the social sector, such as health, such as education, so that this in itself is campaign. You are not going to get to the tail end of 2026 into 2027 to start bribing instead of investing in these people. So as we'll be speaking, you'll see a grim picture that we are in a state that is dire and bleak as regards to the economic and social rights that the ordinary Kenyan cares about, and it's a moment that we need to actually pause and rethink. And importantly is the social protection. I don't know whether we have a moment to speak to that.
We do.
Yes, perhaps I can touch on that quickly.
Can I ask you a question that would lead to that, essentially, because then we're asking questions about what ought to be done, that we can highlight these things, and that the opportunity whereby, one of these things could be speaking to government, but you have to also ask yourself the question is that, are they listening? And beyond listening, are they doing? And that they should be met with chagrin, if they don't already know, about this one glaring thing from this report in terms of who owns Kenya's land. And it's clearly not the people. So even as you go towards social protection, the question is, how are we getting folks who should be in positions whereby they do something about this glaring inadequacies, and not just listen to words that are being said, if that?
Yeah, this is a multifaceted situation that different actors, both within government and without, can be able to take necessary action. And I'm saying this because we have an opportunity to make it right. These are all policy choices. And so when you talk about policy choices, we are basically saying you can do it right as a government. And I have seen in many times, and especially in the recent financial years, where in 2024, 2025, the government of the day has actually developed 3 supplementary budgets. Why is that? Because it's trying to beat the law. So during the allocation process, you make sure that 30% actually goes towards development. When it comes to expenditure, you come up with supplementary budgets, draw monies from the development expenditure, take it into debt repayment, take it into recurrent expenditure, so that at the end of the day hurts the development sectors and the key critical sectors that the ordinary man cares about, which is health, education, food, social protection, and the likes. And this act actually mathematically makes sense because the government has been able to scheme its way around it. But let's face it, this is politically unsustainable, and also morally indefensible. So when we were looking at this study, the cash transfer actually paints really a bad picture. And we have seen people on top of cars actually says, tumetenga bilioni 15 ambayo itaenda kwa wazee, for instance. And we have seen people mention numbers that we have enrolled a good number. And when we were looking at these documents, for instance, the older persons, their enrollment grew because we looked at 5 financial years, that is 2020, 2021 to 2024, 2025. And we saw the number grow from 763,000 to about 1.3 individuals that are enrolled in this program. But again, within those 5 financial years, we see the amounts that are disbursed to this cash transfer program go down. For instance, for older persons, went down from 18 billion to 15 billion. On orphans and vulnerable, the enrollment grew again from 293 to about 443. When you look at persons with severe disability, their numbers grew from 33,000 to about 62,000, and the amounts from 815. The disbursement went down from 815 to 748, and that of orphans and vulnerable children from about 7 billion to 5 billion. So these numbers are going down in terms of disbursement, but enrollment is going up. Let's do a quick math here. So when you divide 15 billion by 1.3, it gives us around 11,000 that each individual receives. But again, the practice has been these monies are disbursed after 3 months. So you divide 11,000 by 3. That gives you about 3,500 thereabout. So divide by a month, each month, it will give you about 1,200 that these individuals receive. So this compromises on dignity, you know. So we cannot purport to be sending money, to be disbursing or claiming to be pushing for social protection, whereas at the end of the day, really this does not uphold human dignity. So this is quite questionable, and the government of the day needs to take note and do better, because they can do better. Just the same way we prioritize the macro level, ensuring that we pay our debt, ensuring that we can appoint very many advisors as much as possible. We should also be deliberate in ensuring that we invest in these sectors. A good example would also be, like, we are talking about 1,200. This coupled with inflation, because again, the purchasing power really is affected. Look at the high cost of living. So, I mean, it's something that really needs to be paid attention to.
Gladys, as we just look at the numbers and what it really paints in terms of 1,200 a month and what that can do really, and we ask the question in terms of, we heard the State of the Nation address, and you just listen to that, and at the macro level, it's doing very well, you know. The international community is, hey, Kenya is doing very well, you know. The Bretton Woods institutions are saying, yes, in fact, we need to come in and strategize how we are sorting things out. But when it comes to the micro, mwananchi, story ni different, kwa ground, mambo ni different, you know. And here's the question where even when we make all these policies, the best feedback mechanism would be the mwananchi. Walk into mwananchi's home and ask them how the situation is. Are they able to afford, they usually say unga, fine. How many ungas can they afford today with that 1,000 shillings, 200 that they have? That's the question. With that 1,200, what can they do with in a month? Pay bills, water, pay steamer. You know, if you have a helper, because you're talking about the elderly, perhaps they have someone who's taking care of them. Maybe even some are taking care of their grandchildren who've been left there, or orphans, you know. And you look at all these, and one would look at a picture that is painted rosy for others to celebrate, but the mwananchi is really at a disadvantage and sad state. Why don't you think about these people who give you tax for you to make the macro level rosy?
Because unfortunately, again, our politics is not usually issue-based, and never is it about the citizen. Majority of people who go into power, they go into power looking in what can I earn. And that explains why majority of even the investments that we are seeing, usually, when you look at it deeply, it's not about the common person, it's not about the citizen, not about the country. It's about how much am I able to make out of this deal. And that explains why we had to transition from NHIF, that was really working so well, to the SHA, that is a little bit hard to every person. When we're talking about the common person, the people who make decisions when it comes to whether SHA is working or not, you hear that SHA is working. But when you go to the common mwananchi, SHA is not working. But they really do not care, because for them it's about populism. We need, as a country, to start thinking on how we want to structure our politics and what exactly we want with our politicians. And also, as the citizens, we need to get to the level and realize that politics determine what you get at the end of it all. So we need to tie our service delivery with the people that we elect. So if we want service delivery, if we want services like healthcare and education to improve, we need to look at the people that we are electing, the people that we are bringing into power. Because most of the time, I think there's usually a disconnect when it comes to leadership and politics. You see Kenyans making very good abstracts, debates, but when it comes to the day of election, I don't know what usually happens. So I don't know whether, looking at even the by-elections just ended last week, and the people who have been elected and the people who have not been elected, and you ask yourself, what exactly as Kenyans do we look for in a leader? So is it the style of how politics is done? Is it about the money that exchanges hands? Who makes decision on who gets in the ballot, who gets elected? So that's where the biggest problem is. But again,
can't it be a combination of all of those things?
Yes.
Or is it not a combination of all of those things that would then make one concerted decision? That there are some people who would vote, and interestingly enough, it sounds crazy, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
And it comes into perspective. That somebody will vote on how somebody looks.
Yeah.
Their looks, aesthetics, we're talking about that. How somebody makes them feel. Somebody will make a decision based on that.
Yeah.
Somebody will make a decision based on how somebody performed before.
Yeah.
Somebody will make a decision on how they spoke to them on a particular day and they don't forget it. Somebody will make a decision based on the fact that somebody gave them 2 strings of sukuma wiki and a packet of flour. Come on, these are the truth. These are the, or
So
sweets.
the vulnerabilities on the ground, in a way, I would say, contribute to the type of leaders that we have. But beyond the vulnerabilities, of course, there's also the aspect of people never knowing the importance of their vote. So in other countries, people know exactly what their vote means. But here in Kenya, I think people have not come to the level of understanding that their vote is very important, and their vote should not just even be bought, because we have seen people selling their votes maybe for 100 shillings, 200 shillings, and it's quite sad. So until we get to that level that every Kenyan, whether educated or not, understands the value of their vote, I think that's a point now we'll be able to make a decision, or rather have leaders who really have the interest of the country at heart. Another aspect that really lacks in our politics and in our governance is the aspect of accountability. So during the campaign period, of course, we have the manifestos. People, they are usually very rosy. But now when it comes to the point of implementation, as a citizen, you never go back and say that when you were campaigning, you promised us ABCD. Have you delivered? No. So that is also a challenge. And I think one of the things that maybe you ask is whether the right people are listening.
Right.
Or rather, this report is going to the right people. I think one of the things that the president has always been said is that he has a debt that he needs to clear, but us as Kenyans, we never give a solution. And in this report of Who Owns Kenya, we are giving a solution that you do not have to go and borrow again. You have resources here that you can use and use very well to be able to collect as much money as you want. In a recent report that was released by Oxfam, I think 2 weeks ago, it shows that for every 100 shillings that is collected in this country, 68 shillings goes to pay debts. So you only remain with 32 shillings, and that 32 shillings is supposed to pay government employees, it's supposed to provide services and all that. So in a nutshell, the government is constrained. But instead of the government looking on who is not being taxed, the government is still going back to this local mwananchi who is already crippled, with taxes already, and they are forgetting that there is a huge wealth base that can be taxed, to cushion a majority of these people. So the land.
This speaks to mwananchi who perhaps needs to be aware of this information, like the report from Oxfam, the report from KHRC, and interrogate and connect the dots on what that means. Because just looking at it, we talk about 2% who control land in the country. What does that mean? We talk about individuals who own these multi-billion enterprises that sell wares to Kenyans. You know what I mean? And you look at the percentage that consumes all these products coming from this less percentage. And that means that the majority have the power because they are the ones who are purchasing. So if they connect the dots, they will understand the need, first of all, of having good people in power that would be able to pass good policies that will cushion them. Because here we are talking about, there's a saying in Nairobi, you can easily walk around in Runda, you can run in the morning in Runda, because why? Yeah. The streets are lit well. You can drive your Lamborghini in the Rundas. Why? Because the roads are smooth, you know. You can enjoy the air because there's no sewer system that has burst. But when you go to where the majority, where Nairobi residents live, the story is different. We have no lighting, there is no water, sewer system is all over the place. Have Kenyans understood the power that they have in their vote? Have they understood the power of electing good people in office that would change their situation to be better? Annette?
Thanks. In 2022, after the general elections, we were left in a limbo, wondering what does the ordinary citizen psyche look like? Yeah, because I mean, it was bare when you look at what we need as a nation, leaders with integrity. And I know individuals with integrity have presented themselves for these high-end offices, including that of the presidency. But is that what we want as Kenyans? And having said that, there's work to do to just unpack and understand what do we want as Kenyans. And as the saying goes, the leaders that we have are a mirror of the people. And so for me, we are at a point as Kenyans, we just need to pause and ask ourselves, what do we want? Because the moment you get the right leaders in office, leaders who have the interest of the people at heart, leaders with integrity, they'll definitely make the right policy decisions. You will make pro-people decisions. You will ensure that you do not have the higher funding education model that is geared towards deepening inequality, that is geared towards privatizing education. You will ensure that you are not working hard towards privatizing health in the country, which everything and policy decisions that we are seeing, especially in those critical sectors, point to that. So the earlier we realize as Kenyans that we have this power. I mean, what does the Constitution say? The Constitution says sovereign power belongs to the people. So by ensuring that we are electing to parliament, to the county assemblies, leaders that have our interest at heart, it means that during the planning and budgeting process, they will not push monies towards CDF. They will not push monies towards award development funds that at the end of the day is a campaign tool for them. So that they'll come back and tell you, you see, we put roads here. But they are telling you that so that you can again re-elect them. So it's not that they are doing it for you, but it's for them. So the earlier we realize and just push that we have parameters to which we are looking at when we are electing people to office, that would be a good starting point. Right now, we are all having this conversation about 2027. But the options are speaking otherwise. And sometimes when I see it, especially post the by-elections that we recently had just last week, and the low voter turnout, something that was conspicuous out there, I keep on asking myself, is it that the youth refused to go vote because they knew that they are either voting the opposition or the current regime, which has completely failed them? Are we seeing an awakening? Is that a boycott by the youth, or what are we basically saying? So importantly is that the ballot decisions that we make as Kenyans, and that can only happen if we have an awakening, if we have the right political education to also understand that why people hold offices is for political reasons, to manage resources, be it public resources, be it monies, and be it natural resources. So we should ensure that whoever we are entrusting this responsibility with, be it the executive or the parliament, is that person that has our interest at heart. If we don't do that, we will continue to be in this situation perpetually, and And yet, post the election, we start complaining, oh, it's not working, we go to protest. So this time around, we have an opportunity to make it right.
Do you think that it's in the hearts and minds of people, Gladys? And I often think that there is a competition of circumstance when it comes to some of these things. That is it top of mind? Do we make the link between good leadership and the services that are required? And if we don't make the link, then it's difficult for us to demand it if we don't even see the connection. That oftentimes we think, okay, so here's a road in my village that it could be a national road or it could then be a county road, whatever the case may be. But I don't make the connection that my kids are going to be late to school, or that the farmer will not be able to take produce to the market if the money that was supposed to be used to build that road has been diverted. I don't make the connection between corruption and lack of services. I don't make the connection then between that and and proper leadership. If I don't make that connection, can I demand something? Can I demand that, if I have not even in my head seen how it works out, how it plays out?
Of course, if there's no that connection, you cannot be able to demand. And I think during the 2024 Gen Z, I would say, uprising, I think we were able to, even the government itself and the politicians were able to really realize indeed the sovereign power belongs to the people. And at that time, if you remember, the Gen Z were really looking at that finance bill and analyzing it and sharing it. And you could clearly see that indeed there's a shift. So for the biggest time, or rather for the longest time in Kenya, politics has always been about tribalism and the Mutuetu syndrome. But now I think this is are going to be changing, especially with the new generation of citizens that we have. Now we're talking about the Gen Z. Right now, the crop of citizens that we have are quite aware. And then also the digital space is really bringing a lot of awareness. And it's something that all stakeholders, including the civil society and the media, needs to take advantage of and see how best we can be able to do a proper political sensitization and education to voters and to citizens come 2027, so that our election of 2027 should be more of issue-based, should be more of demanding and asking questions.